We'll be pushing that out
I have with me here today Ben Fu, and he'll be taking us through rules-based calendaring in Abacus Law. As always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the sidebar, and we'll get to them at the end if we have time. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Ben Fu, and he'll take us through the presentation.
Thank you, Amanda. Welcome all. Thank you for attending another free training Thursday webinar. Today we're going to talk about rules-based calendaring. Okay, so I'm going to start off by giving you a quick overview of what rules are all about, the different types of rules that Abacus has to offer, and then we'll go live into a demonstration on how to create a rule, clone a rule, and even put it into display, okay, within the calendar. So think of a rule as a series of events that can be related with one another within a particular timeline, right? Rules can be reused to schedule a series of related events automatically, okay? So using a particular rule, you can schedule a single trigger event, and then Abacus can automatically schedule the other related events in that particular series that you want, right? So not only do you save time, but also all of the dates are accurately calculated for you, and you can get automatic recalculations if you change a particular date. So having said that, we have different types of rules, okay? You can use rules within the very beginning for within any intake form that you use for different practice areas, right? So what we call general practice templates or rules that we use that can be specific to any one of our practice areas that we offer, anywhere from immigration to civil litigation to personal injury to divorce. Within family law, you got divorce and all the other custody and guardianship, so forth and so on. So it can be the rule that you can use specifically from the very beginning through the intake process. Of course, you have other rules that you can create, such as the federal rules of civil procedures. Okay, those obviously are for purchased through Abacus. Those are timelines for discovery, motions, statutes, and other kinds of deadlines. You also have other kinds of timelines for civil procedures as well. Okay, but those are more specific to not necessarily federal, but obviously different states, right? And then you have, of course, our packages that we offer for the California fast track rules. Within that, obviously, any different counties within the 58 counties that we have to offer within Abacus. Within California, right? And those get updated at the right time for those particular counties. So we offer all that as products. Some of them, obviously, they don't come with what I mean by with, I'm talking about straight out of the box, or you can always end up purchasing those from us if you decide to do so. So having said all that, that's just pretty much a quick overview on how the rules work. What I'm going to do right now is try to show you where you would find these rules, right? And they're going to be under your file, setup, and under your rules option here. So when you click on the rules, you're going to see that since I am obviously one of the product trainers, I have all the rules, not only for the different practice templates, but federal rules and civil procedure rules that I have in place. The one I'm just going to give you a quick demonstration on is going to be one with regards to, let's say, interrogatories, right? So the ones for interrogatories that's being received, okay, you can click on the rules here, and then you will be able to see that this is the type of rule that exists within the many ones that I have. Whenever you want to take a look at a rule that you might already have, if you go into your own Abacus Law, some of you, again, might have purchased some rules already available. Some of you have not used the rules at all. But if you do go under File, Setup, and then Rules, and you simply want to take a look at what makes up that rule that's already within your Abacus, you can always just highlight it and then click on Edit. Because when you click on Edit, then you'll see what the actual rule, all the events actually that form that particular rule. So in this particular example, it's simple enough, but yet I want to make sure I walk you down through it. In the first column, you're going to have your event, the number of the events that you have within this particular rule. In this case, there's 4 of them. The what code is going to be how that has been actually created as far as defining the event and how it's going to show up on your calendar as in this one is a meet, this one is a draft, a reminder, and of course is a ROGS response, okay? And then of course the interval. Okay, of the interval has to do of the difference of the dates within when you place it on your calendar, how many days after the fact will it show up in your calendar. So if you set up you set up this rule start off today, 5 days later, you're gonna have already scheduled for you as a reminder, right? In your reminder box, you're gonna have a schedule as to meet with a client to review the rocks, right? Same thing with the draft. That'll be 15 days in relativity to the date that you schedule in the calendar, and that'll be draft response to the interrogations. And then 20 days later, you're going to get a reminder that says the responder is due in 10 days. So you get the gist of it. You can actually use any one of these that's already comes with Abacus Law, and you can make it your own as well. So if you were to say, okay, I like this where this is going, but I like to add maybe one more event or a few other events to this particular rule that's already in place, you can use this as a foundation and clone it, do a save as, and then add to this particular rule. Okay, if you like this as is, then you can obviously just calendar this anytime you're in your whereabouts in your calendar. You can add, right? Instead of adding just one event, you're going to add events from a rule. So if I wanted to calendar that, I can then start typing in the type of rule that it is, ROGS, right, is interrogatory received. That was called the ROGS uh, received. So I know start typing ROGS, that's the short term, right? And then I would then click on done. And if I click on done, that would simply ask me to then, schedule it in my calendar. So what I'm going to do is I have the who code here of the individuals that want to be informed within that particular rule. I have the what that was going to prompt me to then obviously have all the events scheduled. Today's date, let's say today is when I want to enter it into the calendar. And then of course you always want to use that particular rule to abide by the different kinds, the matters or cases that you want to link it to. So if I picked any one of these, let's say Cindy Martinez, and I want to just link it, it's obviously key here, or very extremely important to make sure that you're linking it to your case or matter so that you can then see and being populated. So then after I do that, and I obviously can link it to a name if I want to, all you have to hit is save. While you hit save, it's going to then ask you, you're scheduling an event that is associated with a rule. Do you want the related event scheduled? Well, clearly, I do want multiple events scheduled because that's why I chose the rule. So I'm obviously going to say yes to that answer. And then it gives you a summary, so to speak, of everything that you're about to book, right? With starting with today's, if you booked it for today, you see how I said 5 days later I was going to book the meet with a client. That's going to set it up as a reminder, and it's going to show up under the calendars of these three individuals. Same concept with the one that was 10 days later, 15 days later, and the one that was 30 days later, right? So it already calculates that because it knew what the rule was. So now it's going to then calendar it for us, right? Not only is it going to be under the actual case as a summary like this, under Cindy Martinez, but the individuals that are involved will then be able to see it, okay, 5 days later. So if I go back to, sorry, if I go forward, right, to my first 5 days to the 25th, then you can see that meet Cindy Martinez, meet with a client, review the rocks, it's going to be already in place. By the same token, if you ever wanted to edit any of this information or uh, change it, you can either double click on the calendar event, go in there and make any changes to it, whether you wanted to change who the who code belongs to, if only a certain people should be involved, any of those edits, instead of maybe all three, maybe one person only needs to meet with a client, you could do it from here, or you could have done it from the case, okay? But the calendars, the changes can be done by any one of the members that were originally assigned to that particular case. If I go back now into my matters and I pull that matter and I go into my events, you can then see that all of them are going to be the related with the changes here. They're all going to have the same rule, ROGS received, and then you're going to see the ones that I already made the change to. So now I know that BD is the only one attending this one because I made the change, through the calendar. So basically, what you have here is you can have everything pre-configured as a rule on how you want things set up, but after the rule is set, you can still make some edits later down the line. Okay, so now let's go back really quickly to that same um, procedure of a rule, and let's try to make some changes as to how I want those rules to actually be reflected. And I'm going to show you what I mean by the different types of changes that you can make. So the original one that we set up, instead of doing edits after the fact, and let's say from a pre-configured motion, you wanted to come in here and change it up a little bit. Let's say you didn't like so much the one that Abacus had to offer, but you like the foundation that it provided, right? So I'm going to, instead of hitting edit, I'm going to clone it. And while I clone it, I'm going to give it a new name. So instead of, ROGs received, I'm just going to call it, I'm just going to say test ROGs, right? You can call it whatever you want, obviously within your firm's specifics. And then test ROGs, and then I'm going to go, and then you can then in here test into, and then you can say ROGs received, and you can put here obviously as lengthy of a description as you would like. And while I'm here, now I can make changes to this. Okay, so if I have that, I always want one person to be the same person that's going to meet with the client to review the interrogations, the interrogatories, then I can always have that set up. If I simply just double click, go to event detail, I can then pick whom within your firm should be the only person actually handling this. So I can then say, oh, CP would be the person that always handles the meetings with the interrogatories. So you can hit done, and you can change that. What if you don't want to set up that to necessarily just be a reminder, but rather a things to do? Because there is a difference between reminders and things to do. Remember, reminders don't roll over to the next day if they weren't marked. If they were not marked complete, right? If things to do were not marked completed or marked it's done, they still roll over to the next day. You'll be able to see it on your calendar. So a lot of people, instead of having set up the time as reminders to show up as reminders here, they like to set them up as to dos, so they can click on the time, then go to do, and you can, by the way, you can also set up a specific time during the day when you want to set up those meetings, or in this case, a meeting with the clients. If you always want to do it at 4 o'clock, you can do that and have it preset as well. Okay, so let's do it to do instead. So now what I've done, I've made some changes to that particular rule that we had. It's always going to be received by a particular person who's going to be doing the meetings, and it's going to show up in their calendars as a things to do. By the same token, if I wanted to go in and I wanted to change the interval of days, instead of making it say 15 days, you want to make that 10 days, you can simply change the interval from when the relative to the event zero, right? Before it was relative to event zero, whatever you actually calendared or temporarily, or tentatively, I should say, you calendared in the schedule, in the calendar. So right now you can change it to 10 days off of the date that you calendar, and you can click done. By the same token, you could have done the same thing and then use that one as a trigger. So if the draft is done, okay, that's when I want to know that I want to start getting the reminder. So if you wanted to do that, then you can then use that trigger point. Okay, when event number 2 is taken care of, or if that happens, or when the date is completed, or in other words, I should say, that days that you're anticipating doing, I want it 20 days from that day, so then I can start, getting a reminder pop up. So you have options here to change the dates that you want and what events you want to use as your trigger point. Okay. Um, by that same concept, you can also have within these days that you can use, if anything falls on a weekend date, you can always have it moved, right, to whether it's a Friday or you want to move to a Monday. Most folks like to move it to a Friday. If you're using that already as your system options to move it to a Friday when something falls on a weekend, that's by default already checked for you. Okay, so this gives you plenty of ways of editing or altering whatever ones already exist as far as a foundation of the rules that we've created. So when I'm done with this, I can simply hit done, and then I can use this one in particular with these particular changes. You can also create one from scratch. So if you wanted to start one altogether, right, one particular rule from the very beginning, you can go again to your rules. You can click on add, and then it'll start asking you, right? The rules must be named a valid what code before you start doing them. So you can say okay to that. Here's where you would enter your rule name. And then again, after you put your rule name, you can then go proceed, and then this is how you would start doing and entering. So if you have an idea of a workflow that you want to establish already or put in place, you can always have it sort of like in a outline, and then put event by event together, starting with your what. So if it's the first one is meet with a client, again, you can just start meet. Some of these are already going to be in place for you depending on which practice pals you might have in place already. So if you have PI, you might have some what codes already established. If you have some family laws, some of these already might be in place. If not, you can always create your own what codes and go from there. So let's say the first one is first meeting with a client to get their location. You can simply just highlight that, tab over, and just like that, let's say you want to put one person to be responsible for meeting with a client all the time. You can then highlight their name, and that's going to overwrite whatever you choose when you set up in the calendar. And again, let's say it's a to-do, and you want to click on done. So just like that, I just added the first event within my rule that I wanted to create. After meeting with a client, if I wanted to add another event, you can click obviously on add, and then it'll move into the next one. So subsequently, obviously, what I said, just have it outlined in your on the side here as a note. And then after that, you'll be able to then come back in here and modify as many as the changes as you would like, um, you know, to incorporate within your rules. Obviously, it's only really going to go into effect when you actually go back to the calendar and actually start using those rules that you created. Okay, so in a nutshell, there can be rules not only from the very beginning of an intake process or from a workflow standpoint for a particular practice area to any federal rules of civil procedures or obviously any California fast track rules. So there's a wide variety of rules that can be set up. It depends on how you want to use it and the purposes obviously within your different firms and practices that you might have. I'm going to open it up to some questions now. So if you guys want to start writing in the questions, I'll be more than happy to start answering them. One of the questions by Natasha is, can we purchase the rules pre-made already? The answer is yes. We actually offer rules packages depending within your state and counties, federal rules as well. We offer those, and those are for sale. So it's just a matter of you needing one specific set of rules and us doing a little demo on that for you, and then that can be definitely sold to you. Natasha's asking for state and federal in Alaska. Don't know if we have for Alaska, the state for the Alaska. I would have to look into that for you and provide you, but I'm going to say no right off the bat, but I have to double check. So the question by Marissa is, how do you edit the rule that pops up when you open a case using the customized intake form? Excellent question, Marissa. So A lot of our intake forms already come with a specific rule embedded within them. Most of the time is going to be the one called new case. So what happens is, because the intake form already comes with that rule called new case, you are able to, if you wanted to, right, actually modify that particular rule called new case. So you can go to setup, you can go to rules, and if I go to rules right now and I start typing new case, you're going to notice that there's going to be maybe several here new case in my example. The original one was called new case. If you needed to actually change that a bit, as you can see, I have different examples here where I've actually modified it a little bit. If I do, all you want to do is, again, clone it. So you would highlight it, new case, right? You would clone it. And I'm just going to say uh, test for Thursday, right? Training. Okay, and that's just because we're doing a test today. And I would hit done. And then you see this particular rule. If I wanted to make any changes to this rule, as I mentioned before, all you got to do is come in here, add more events, change some of the intervals, and go from there. But the idea is that at the end of the day, you can ultimately have one rule, right, that you're going to link up to each one of your intake forms based on your different, let's say, practice areas. So let's say you were doing family law. For family law, you're going to have one intake, one rule embedded within the intake form for divorce, only specific to the steps and subsequent action items that you want to have within your series of events within a timeline after you start a divorce case, right? Maybe you want one for custody, or then you want another one for guardian or domestic violence. So you can have each one of these rules pre-created and then link them to each one of your intake forms. So let me show you what you need to do after you create the rules. And let's say you have developed all those different types of rules. Then you can go back to your file, setup, and then you're going to go, instead of rules, this time you're going to go into your intake form manager. Now we're talking about a specific practice or a specific intake form that you were mentioning. So let's say it was, again, family law, and then let's say it was divorce. So now I'm going to go into my divorce intake form, right? I'm going to edit that intake form, and I'm going to go into my records. Within my records section, under events, I want to edit the property because that's where the rule is going to reside within the events, right? So I'm going to go edit properties, and then you're going to notice, okay, that in the what is where the rules again resides, in the what code. So if you're going to go to the what code, I want to edit that field. And then right off the bat, you're going to see the default value of that particular rule, in this case called new case, as I mentioned, is going to be sitting right then and there. So if you were to create a rule and you called it testing Thursday, like I did, then you would take that rule that you created and you modify it, and you would enter it here and literally type out test Thursday, right? THU, whatever it was. And then it'll know the intake form now for this divorce, for any divorce intake form that you have, it's always going to use that particular rule that you just embedded right here within behind the scenes, so that when you generate it and pops up, you say yes, and then all the ones that you modified as far as the rule is concerned are going to show up. Okay, hopefully that answers your question. So it's a two-step process, right? Identifying first which rule you want, right, by creating the rule or modifying the rule, and then going back into the intake form, right, and the file setup intake form manager, choosing the form that you're going to embed that new particular rule to, right, link it to, and then, obviously put the proper new rule that you want in there for that particular intake form. I have another question from Robert here. He says, do you have rules for North Carolina civil practice? Again, off the bat, I don't know that on top of my head, whether we have that or not. I would have to double check for you and get back to you on that, Robert. Let's see, are there any other questions? The question is again from Natasha. She's saying if we know our rules, we can create the rules and calendar the times correctly. Yes, that is exactly what you can do, and it's just a matter of again you outlining the events that you want at within a particular timeline, and then translating that into here within Abacus, and the due process again will be file setup, rules, and you can, like I said before, you can start from scratch and start one off by creating a new rule first, and then step by step you can start adding those particular events. And then after you have created it and used it and saved it, then it's just a matter of you coming in here to your calendar whenever you want to apply that, and then start obviously hit add events from a rule and go from there. Okay. Okay, so one of the other questions here it says is that can you explain how to edit rules for case schedules? Well, in the instance of any case that you might have already implemented, it's just a matter of choosing the particular, let's see, there's one here. To rules file for, there's one called file for a San Diego complaint as the complaint. So some of these we already have. Obviously, this is an example that is for purchase. So to take a quick look within a particular uh, case that you created, and let's say it requires to file a complaint. This would be an example of how it would look like. It gives you the breakdown from the very beginning as to when it says LD, last date to serve summons and complaint. It gives you the timeline here again within the interval of what it needs. If one event is triggered by another one, you can see how these events are already in place. That the response needs to happen, right? And it's going to be triggered by event number one. So if that date falls on a particular day, that one will be the last day for you to the defendants to file the serve. So it's just a matter of uh, knowing again, purchasing the right um, rules, civil procedure rules in place, and then obviously seeing how it's being calendared and go from there. The other question is, various counties have their own local rules with different deadlines. Can I set up rules that will trigger based on the county? Yes. So you can use maybe even purchase one of our civil procedure rules for a different state, but then take that and modify it to apply it to your county specific. The other question is, what are the negative values in the interval columns? Well, the negative values is 7. It's saying so days before the actual event happened. So in this case, last day to file a service, a server case management, that's going to be calendared for you 15 days before event 7 happens. So whenever this falls on, which is the date that the initial case management conference starts, that's when you're going to enter the date. So if you enter the date, let's say, I don't know, let's just make this up. I don't know, October 1st, right? If October 1st, that's when you set up the original calendar event, then it'll know 15 days before, obviously. Well, October 1st is not a good example. Let's say you do October 30th, right? October 30th is what you put in the calendar. Then on 15 days before October 30th, which will be October 15th, right? That's when you're going to have this in your calendar set up. So you can do Days after or days before can be pre-scheduled. Okay. Well, it looks like that's it for the questions, and we've run out of time. So hopefully you guys got a pretty good gist of what rule-based calendaring is all about. Just know that we do offer classes if you want, well, not classes, but let's say sessions that are more what we call Abacus Law specialized training, where if you wanted to, you know, do a step-by-step breakdown of how to create your rules, and if you run into any obstacles, how to fix those and actually apply them on a one-on-one training, we can we obviously offer that, and you can be specific as to exactly what you want to cover during the training, whether it's rules related or say, okay, I have this example that I've done these steps, but I still am stuck on this particular step. And then if you do book one of those one-on-one sessions, then we will be able to walk you through how to set everything up. You obviously would, that depends on the value you see in that, as far as setting up your rules-based calendaring. All right. Thank you all for attending, and until next time, have a good day and weekend.